We all know that real estate has created more millionaires than any other industry on the planet. We also know that it has created a lot of heartache due to mismanagement, overborrowing, and just simple life events that happen to all of us. Welcome to the CashFlowPro podcast. My name is Casey Brown, and I am your fearless leader. And although we might be bourbon sipping and at times foul-mouthed Southerners, we will always do our best to be honest, straightforward, and due diligent with all of the information we pass along to you. Welcome to the show. Hey there, and welcome to today's episode of CashFlowPro, your daily real estate investing podcast and YouTube channel. I'm here today with Peter Politis of Greybrook. Peter, how are you today?
Good, Casey. How are you?
Oh man, just trying to get through the day here and trying to kind of excited about hopefully hearing some of the stuff that you all have going on, and maybe we can educate the listeners a little bit and really kind of show them how you all have been moving the needle for so long now. So why don't you kind of start off, Peter? Tell us a little bit about yourself, where you come from, and how you got started in real estate investing and so on.
Yeah, for sure. So we're based out of Toronto, though we invest throughout North America, mostly in Toronto here in Canada, but across several states in the U.S. And I was actually born in Toronto, but I was raised in South Florida, which was basically grade 3 through high school. I lived down there, ended up coming back up here in Toronto for university, and started the business shortly out of university. I figured, one of the few people who'd want to give me a job is me.
Yeah. You didn't even have to make a resume, did you? That's right. That's right.
But it's always funny. I had a passion for real estate, though my parents are in pharmacy and pharmacology as backgrounds. They were also real estate agents up here, both in South Florida and in Toronto. So as a good old Greek, it's in our blood. It's either real estate or making sandwiches, and I'm not much of a cook, so it was really not a big choice, but
there you go.
yeah. But I got into the real estate investment business. Greybrook has two other partners other than myself. It's myself, my partner Sasha and Elias, and we started the business really right here in Toronto. And what we did is we focused on investing in what traditionally has been probably the darkest hole of real estate investing, which is development. Most people don't do it as much. It's highly complicated. And it's really a lot of projections from nothing, because you really have an empty piece of land. We didn't realize how hard it was when we started. We just thought it was a logical place to start because you could make a good return in there. But over the years now it's coming on, and I have to say it out loud, this is my 18th or 19th year. When I say it like that, I feel old. But it's my 18th or 19th year doing it. And we've grown. It started off with a couple of guys, and now we've got about $30 billion worth of development. We've done over 100 development projects and like 60 million square feet across North America. So it's been nice.
Man, that's awesome. And I'll tell you, I think when you call development a black hole, I think that's kind of actually putting it mildly, considering it just, like most of the time in the development projects that I've been involved with, and it just almost becomes like a service business, really, because then you end up having to make sure that all of the subs have their backs padded, and it ends up being a service business, I think, is at least the way a lot of people look at it. But nevertheless, man, I mean, that's awesome. So do you all buy any existing, or do you just purely do development?
Yeah, so I mean, I would say the lion's share of our portfolio is development based for a number of reasons, which I'll talk about. But a very small segment of our portfolio is what I guess is commonly referred to as value add investing. So we'll buy old apartment buildings, or let's say garden style townhouse developments. We'll buy, renovate, offer a new product, therefore increasing the rents and increasing the income, and then we'll sell out from under it. Most of our value add business is either in Montreal, here in Canada, or right now it's based mostly in Houston in the U.S., though we're expanding our U.S. footprint. But relative to the scale of development, it's tilted more heavily towards investing in development than it is in the value add space. But we invest in the value add space because it's, income's obviously a good thing, and real estate, most people think of real estate, think of income producing stuff. So we play in that space as well. But development's so complicated, and we've gotten so good. We think we've gotten so good, anyways, at understanding it and how to maximizing money that I think it's an area where if you're an expert at it, you can extract more value than most. It's a little harder to do that in some cases with existing real estate.
Yeah. And then, I can only imagine how complicated you all really do like things, especially when you say Houston is a market where you do some value add it too, because Houston can be complicated. It can be super complicated. I just know that there's a lot there that some zoning and some other things that you really have to be careful of in Houston.
It's actually funny you say that. So in Toronto, it's like going through a zoning process. You need to have like a double doctorate from MIT. Like it's
Yep.
probably some of the most complex zoning, detailed, black hole of a process anywhere in the world. We just happened to start it 20 years ago when it was a little easier and got to learn a lot of the trades and how to do that and got good at it. When we got down to, we've got stuff going on in Miami and in Fort Lauderdale and Atlanta and Denver and Houston and Nashville. We go through some of these zoning processes. It's like a welcome relief of ease. I'm like, oh my God, this is complicated. Like this makes sense. There's no logic. Like logic is thrown out the window here in Toronto. At least down here, it makes logical sense. Logic's not welcome up here.
Yeah, I think a lot of people see that in their home markets for sure, because it's just like, because you see and you deal with that stuff every day, and you're like, well, it makes sense to put this here, but it makes no sense to put it over there. But then they put it even further from that. So no, I understand. So so what? Obviously, I feel like maybe you have a preference of development, but really, in all reality, which one do you prefer, the value add or the new ground up?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. In Toronto, there's a really big for sale condo market. Like we sell 25, 30,000 new condos a year in the city, which if you look at some of the places in the US, we multiply, X factor times New York or even in Miami or some of the shadow condo markets like Chicago or San Francisco. We've blended the two together in the US in most of our development stuff, which is we'll develop stuff, but it's mostly purpose-built rental under our co-living platform called Society. So the answer is, while I prefer to develop because I can build it at a better cap rate than I can buy it. The for sale stuff that we typically do in Toronto, we do less of down there in the US, even though we do have some condo developments, including the Waldorf Astoria residences in Miami. But we can build these rental buildings, design them how we kind of like to use the buildings and the formats, and then keep them for income if we want at the end of the day.
Sure. Yeah. And that's one of those deals where it seems like just based on the market and based on the what am I trying to say? Like where things are in that market at that current time is going to seems like it plays a lot into what you all do and what you like to do.
We focus on kind of major U.S. cities. So like I mentioned just a few in terms of where we're at in Denver and Atlanta, and Nashville, Miami, and Fort Lauderdale, and other places like that. Obviously, rent-burdened cities. But the thing that I noticed a lot of these areas, and whether it's the way things were done or the availability of land, a lot of these rental buildings have very large format units. And what I mean by that is you have 800, 900, 1,000 square foot, one bedroom units. And in Toronto, we've been forced to live on such smaller areas just because the cost and availability of land and density that we've brought some of that smaller format unit to these rent burdened cities. And we try to buy real estate in kind of the best corners of the city, but by delivering smaller format units, but they have highly amenitized buildings so you can live in and inside and outside your unit. We kind of want to be the best building for the cheapest total dollars out of everyone's pocket, even though it's slightly smaller, maybe a little more carefully designed units in the market. So we can be in the best areas for the cheapest total dollars out of somebody's pocket.
Sure. And I think, especially in America, we're not used to, and I think what I hear you describing is kind of a European style, where everything is compact, it's small, just like the smaller washers and dryer. Well, as a matter of fact, in Europe, washers and dryers are one machine.
In the kitchen.
Yeah, in the kitchen. Yeah. So, it's in America, we're a little bit spoiled on having space to move and do and run and do how we like, because there's so much of it. So I want us to change gears here just a little bit, and I'd like to talk about the capital raising side and the investor side. And then, because when I go to your website, it obviously, and it's, what a neat website too, by the way. It's it's Vision Capital Execution. Now I feel like we've kind of covered the execution side of things, but when we start talking about the capital side of things, do you all deal with like individual retail investors? Do you deal mostly with like
Institutional.
family offices, or traditional
Yeah.
brokers, or how do you all do that?
Yeah. So a couple things. When we started, like we didn't have thousands of investors across all these different places and countries and institutional guys. So when we started looking for investing in development, what we did is we partner with developers, and we have our own in-house development expertise as well, and we co-manage these things. But it seemed like there was nobody auditing or really understanding what the developer was doing in this space. And there needed to be a company that, in our view, was made that had the expertise and helped execute the development, but wasn't necessarily the hands-on developer in all cases. And why that is the case is because the average person investing, or even, by the way, institution or family office, if you can believe it, don't actually even know if some of these assumptions are appropriate, aggressive, conservative, make sense, don't make sense. And that's why development is so complicated, because nothing's there. It's a raw piece of land, and understanding all those things. So when we started, we started with individual investors, and we still do. We have probably 8,000 investors across 30-something different countries across the world. We report in several different languages, but obviously that's grown into institutional investors, family offices, high net worth families, and you name it. So the answer is we have a meld today of who we deal with, but we still have a very high number of over 8,000, let's call them high net worth individual investors. And that can be anything from a, doctor, lawyer, accountant, athlete, actor, to some of the wealthiest families in the world. And
Sure.
for us, I think providing them access with somebody that represents their interests throughout the entirety of the development process is why we think we've been able to be long-term successful. Because we're not just relying on somebody else from their one perspective of the world telling us what these numbers are. We have our own perspective and our own day-to-day execution representing the money every day.
Sure. And that's what an interesting take. And when you start talking about, so you all kind of co-manage, but you bring some funds, and then that investor knows that they've got representation within that deal specifically for their interests.
Yeah, I mean, it's not because our partners aren't good people and they're not capable.
No, I understand.
But the truth of the matter is that you'd be surprised how much real-time problem solving there goes into on the development side. I mean, you've got a plan, but these are 3, 5, 7, 10-year investment horizons, right? So imagine the thing that I thought 7 years ago may not hold today for different reasons, and you got to weigh risk, reward, decisions. And sometimes there's decisions that just the perspective of the investor isn't the first thing that a developer thinks about every time. And for us to put our experience together with our 100 projects and their execution, we feel really at the end of the day makes for the best possible return over the long term for our investors.
Well, and I feel like there's somebody there to advocate to get the advocation to get one more bid, and that one more bid saves the whole project $5 million.
Yeah.
And then, and if you're looking at it saying, hey, I know we can get that done better, cheaper, more from a better reliable source, whatever, and it ends up saving monetarily, it saves everybody, then it obviously increases the return. So that makes perfect sense. Now,
it's actually it's just because you brought that up, you tweaked something. When we started doing this wasn't exactly highly sophisticated 20 years ago versus what it is today, but we've been able to use our scale in many different ways to get bulk pricing, whether it comes to drywall, rebar, concrete, even their banking relationships. Like, as you've gotten to a certain scale, mostly by just putting your head down and working hard for a long time, we've now found ways down the road to leverage that scale into better profits for our developers, our investors, that any one developer couldn't do on its own.
Sure. Yeah, and that's just that's like crowdsourcing or crowdfunding basically in a nutshell, by saying, hey, let's collaborate here and let's buy 100 instead of just buying one. And obviously we're going to get a better deal, because then whatever the developer or whoever doesn't have to handle everything else. So on you said you have a 8,000 investors, individual investors that invest with you all?
Yeah, 8,000 investors in 30 something different countries now. And it all started with myself and our partners just going and talking to somebody I started working in the business when I was 21 years old. I'm 30, I won't say I'm 39 years, gonna be 40 years old, not too long from now. Yep. And believe it or not, there wasn't thousands of people that were just dying to invest in a business that just started, with a 21-year-old kid starting it. And it really just became us telling a story of why we thought investing development was good, why we thought we could pick the right partners. And you tell one story and another story, and then somebody refers you to another person, and you pick your head up, almost 20 years later, and you managed to have 8,000 people that you thought that you've done good by and worked hard for, and they continue to invest.
Sure. And then that's, do you all, of the 8,000, what percentage do you think are reinvestors after the first deal, or the bulk of them?
Yeah, it's like 90-something%. Like I can't remember the exact number, but somewhere above 95% at this point.
And what do you attribute that do you attribute that reinvesting percentage being that high strictly to the returns or the customer service?
No, the thing about development, which mostly is not a cash flowing thing, is you really make an investment on one day and you wait many years to get your return.
Yeah.
So if you have a bad experience for many years and you get a big check at the end of it, no one's ever going to reinvest. I mean, we focus a lot on investor communication, reporting, transparency, details. I mean, if someone doesn't feel like they know what's going on or they have the information they need with it being a dead money investment like that, you're never going to get them. It doesn't matter what their return is at the end of the day. So I think it's communication, reporting. Even if you just saw our website, no matter where these projects are, anywhere in North America, you can have access and information. And we have a team that's really focused on just investor reporting and managing these investors.
Yeah. And I think that's, that seems to be the big thing that a lot of the people that come in newly to the capital raising business are like, okay, well, what do investors want? Well, they want to know two things. They want to know when they're going to hear from you, or how often they're going to hear from you. And they want to know when they're going to get their money back, or a general idea of when they're going to get their money back. They don't even aside of that, it's like a gut feeling of I've had a lady on here who does passive investing, and I said, what's the one thing you look for when you go to invest in a deal? She said, I trust my gut. And I was like, what? you trust, but at the end of the day, obviously the numbers were just kind of rambling to her, but at the end, where the rubber met the road was, do I trust this person? And so, and when you can build that rapport and then let them know, hey, you're going to hear from me quarterly for the next however many years, sometimes we may not have as much to tell you as we had to tell you other times. It's just a matter of
I
what
think
they
the
can
other
expect.
thing is, most people who do raise capital, they don't do it as principals like we do. Most people who raise capital kind of have, like, I don't want to say an investment banking model, but they're raising money for deals, and then they aren't involved on an ongoing basis. Even if they're reporting, they're just collecting information and putting it in a format. They're not getting in there and having hard costs or financing discussions, or they're not getting in the weeds of what's going on. So when we have these discussions with our investors, because we live in the weeds at every aspect of this stuff, like you said, they may remember 1% of what they heard from us when they got off the phone or got off an email chain, but they remember how they felt, and they know that they have somebody who's really in there getting into the weeds and knowing what's going on, rather than just collecting information from a third party, formatting it to our standard report and saying, I don't know, don't ask me any questions, here you go.
Yeah. And that was what you just said was a main cornerstone of Steve Jobs and his abilities to move people was people, they don't remember a lot of things. They don't even remember how much money you gave them back, but they do remember how you made them feel. They will always, forever and ever and ever, remember how you made them feel. And that's not just the feeling up front, that's the feeling throughout.
It's funny you say that because there's most people literally have no idea what return they made at the end of the investment. It just I was happy, I was not happy, I was pleased. And at the end of the day, it's when you're dealing with people, people think that's how people are. Institutions are the same way. You think that these like giant, robust institutions should have all these sophisticated ways and robotically thinking everything analytically. No, they're people too. They report to their bosses, they report to their pension people and whatever. And at the end of the day, they just want to make sure they know what's going on. They feel good. Someone's doing good by them every day. And that's what's all they can ask for in terms of where they put their money.
Yep. And that's most definitely all spot on, all of it. All right. So we had talked a little bit before we hit record about a project you've got in Nashville now. Is that an upcoming? Just I'm specifically gonna zone in on that because it's obviously right down the road from me. But what is this? You had said some things while we talked about that made that awful intriguing for me to learn more about. Is it existing right now, or is it getting ready to be built?
No, it's getting ready to be built. So just taking a step back, we have a national partner called PMG, Property Markets Group, based out of Miami, and we basically have a development thesis where we want to come into some of these rent-burdened cities, come in and build highly amenitized buildings where people can live inside and outside of their units, where we have gyms that are the size of Equinox, and we have co-working spaces and whiskey tastings and cooking classes, and basically it's like living on a cruise ship, but on land. That's how it's with technology. And people, when I say that, people really get it. Like, oh, I understand. And part of that is a rent by bedroom portion, which is co-living. But when people think rent by bedroom, they think almost like dorm housing or lower end housing. These are luxury units that you basically have your own bathroom and a separate additional lock to your bedroom. But the bonus is, and I don't know if anyone's ever lived with a roommate. I had a roommate once upon a time. Now I have a roommate that I'm married to and two kids that live there all the time. So, but what really happens is that you have to get on a lease and everyone's responsible. And if somebody leaves, you got a problem and you're splitting bills and all that stuff. We've taken all that out of there and saying you can come by yourself, rent a bedroom, have a common area, and do that. That's about, I would say, 20-25% of our units are rent by bedroom, and the rest are either smaller format stuff, studios, 1 bedrooms and 2 bedrooms as you go on. And one of the places that we've done this is in Nashville at the Gulch, and why that is especially if you're living close to the area, you've seen how much rent has exploded. You've seen how many people are coming into that city, and at the end of the day, there's only so many total dollars people can afford, but they don't want to substitute a living experience. So I don't want to live in a dorm. If I have to live in a dorm, I might do that, but I want to live in a place that has, we have bars in there. In some of these places that we have hair salons to get your hair done. We've got coffee houses in the lobby. Like, think about these places where, while I can rent a bedroom in a unit that's a co-living space, I can also have a regular unit, but I have all these highly amenitized items at my doorstep. And what that really means is that we're building these buildings because in our view, they don't exist in this format today, and retrofitting buildings is not as appropriate of a way, and I don't think works as well in the long term to building it. So we're designing these spaces that our building in Nashville might have 470 units in there, but it has a size of amenity space that's probably traditionally to a building that's 3 times its size, and all of it becomes included in the rents, whether it's internet, whether it's gym memberships, whether it's co-working stuff. And why we do that is because at the end of the day, we want people to continue living in our buildings and either moving up through the building into larger format units or individual units. But we also think the living experience is really important. So we call it society. So we want to know that when you live in a society building, whether it's Nashville, whether it's Miami, Fort Lauderdale, Atlanta, Denver, or wherever, you can have this living experience that you expect.
Yeah. Now, is this, so there was I don't want to draw I don't want to draw any correlations between your all's program when I asked this, but there's a guy, I think his name is Adam something. He used to run a company called WeWork, and he has supposedly raised some absorbent amount of money, and he has a company that's valued at 300 plus billion right now today, post the whole WeWork world. um, that has some type of a similar, like, I guess and I'm asking this because is this the way that you see some of these bigger cities going? Is this the direction, this type of living situation, the direction?
Yeah, so a couple things. One, um, that company, Adam's company, actually bought one of the buildings that we designed, finished, and built and leased. They bought it from us
What
um,
city?
in Fort Lauderdale.
Okay. Yep,
Um,
I knew he was south, and he's in Nashville too. I think he's got one or two. Anyway, go ahead.
yeah, so
Adam
yeah,
Newman,
yeah,
right?
Newman. Yeah.
Yep.
So his organization bought one of these assets that we built because it effectively embodied exactly what he wanted to do. Now, when I say exactly what he wanted to do, I'm sure when he bought the building, he changed a bunch of stuff in terms of his vision and whatnot. But our philosophies are a little bit aligned. Now, the I think where they're going is creating a living experience and also are concerned with affordability. But when you think about rents, people don't think about I'm paying $2, $4, $5 a square foot. They're paying $500 a month, $2,500 a month, $3,000 a month. But if you can create a mousetrap that people are going to want to live in for a certain amount of total dollars in smaller space, when you become the landlord of the building and you can charge a higher per square foot rent, all of a sudden your building becomes more profitable and more valuable. And that involves the living experience because you can't live in a small space if it's crappy for very long, and not for when you think about real estate, they're 10, 20, 50-year assets. So his company, while I don't know a lot about all the intricate details of, I know they've raised some money, and it's a little bit easier to have a company valued at, I don't think it's quite as high as you said, but they're buying real estate. So the value of real hard assets can really add up as you're buying stuff. So it becomes a little bit less, random than the valuation of a tech company on future revenues 5-7 years down the road and a multiple of that. But
Well, and I think it's the same way when we start talking about net worth of some of these individuals in this game too, where so and so has a net worth of say $5 billion, when in fact, is that his net worth, or is that the total net worth of all of his investors, or is that even a net?
pre-tax, post-tax, marketable, how much is liquid, can't sell a share if I wanted to. Like all this stuff is
They
part
go
of
for the number that has the biggest marketing bang.
yeah, at the end of the day, I kind of have this joke because most people who invest generally think of IRR, right, when they're investing. And I like to make the joke around here that you can't eat IRR. You can only eat real
Yeah.
dollars. So
Hi, this is Casey Brown, host of the CashFlowPro podcast and YouTube channel. Have you been thinking about investing in real estate but just don't know where to begin? I'd like to help by inviting you to check out our website at www.3000capital.com. There you will find an array of material that will help you learn all about real estate syndication. And while you're there, be sure to check out our free video series download titled 5 Must-Know Keys to Success in Passive Real Estate Investing. I'd also like to personally thank you for making CashFlowPro part of your day. Now, back to the show.
At the end of the day, our job, and that's one of the reasons why I think we focus on development, is because you can make a real appropriate amount of total dollars for yourself and for your investors if you're willing to have patience and knowing what you're doing. And these buildings that we're creating, it's these large units are reaching a cap where people can't afford to pay more for them. They can't afford to pay more total dollars. And what that does is it actually devalues the real estate at a certain point. Because if you have an asset that can never get you more than $2,000 a month in rent, or $3,000, whatever that number is, 500, whatever it is, that's going to have a cap on the value of your building. How do you do that? You got to make smaller spaces. People can pay less total dollars, but have the ability to more people to get in there. And it actually works for both. It works for the consumer, and as us being the developer, it works for us and an ability to make money from it. Now, I can tell you, I don't know, 5-6 years ago, whenever we started doing this product, everyone thought that who's going to want to live in smaller spaces, and your amenities, and you're building too many of them. And it was almost like anytime you try to do something new in real estate, generally speaking, it's met with resistance. But because we've seen it happen in Toronto, and we know that the rent burden is a real issue, and people want to live it, like, what do millennials want, or whatever the next generation is? Everybody wants a living experience. They'll spend money on an experience before anything else. And I think that's what we're kind of melding, those two worlds of living like a life experience, along with an affordable place to live, but not sacrificing it being luxurious or highly amenitized.
Yeah, and and because at the end of the day, we all know that the value of the building is directly tied to the cap rate of the NOI. I mean, so it's
And
the
your ability to
NOI
raise the
basically
NOI.
determines the yeah, and
Because
so
that's
and
perfect.
the more incomes you can get in one, the more incomes per square foot you have, the better your NOI is, the better your cap rate is, the higher your value of your building is.
Yeah, and our ability to increase rents is greater because our total dollars is starting at a lower point than the average point of the market. So for us, it's like one of these things where you'll look at our per square foot rent is the highest in the neighborhood, but our chunk rates are the least, and our ability to raise rents above what you see in the general market is more because the total dollars that it means the consumer is less. So like we kind of get it from all angles.
Yeah, yeah. And then I guess what's to be seen on some of these models, which I'm assuming in some bigger cities, New York and so on, has already these models have been tested and seen and so on and so forth. But I guess what's to be seen is the service side of things, like you're talking about these luxurious, these nicer, higher end stuff, and then what other amenities do those people expect to come along with it, and then what types of service businesses does the owner, like Greybrook or whoever, or society, or
Yeah.
your company that handles it, what types of service businesses do you end up acquiring through that either could be a headache or could not?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. If we sell a building, we let them keep it for a little bit. We don't want to keep our brand on it because at the end of the day, how they run the building could reflect obviously
Sure.
on us. But we ancillary have these discussions with our partners because we have restaurants in these places, we have coffee houses, we have salons, and we have preferred operators, and we find our way of like somehow getting involved in these businesses, not by choice, by necessity, in order to create kind of like you have a pool and you have a pool bar you want to have, and you've got an operator, and you have these different things when you go into these places. So you get into these ancillary businesses just by the fact that you want to deliver an experience at the end of the day. But I think that's what's going to keep people there is the life experience. Your place will be your place, and that's going to be what it's going to be. But the number of things you can do, we kind of have a running joke in the office that we think that our buildings cure loneliness. Like the answer is there's always something to do, whether you're living there by yourself or there's an event there or all these different stuff. And I think that's what at the end of the day is going to really be the next wave of real estate, is not just the bricks and mortar, but what is the life experience I get from it?
Sure. Awesome. Well, man, Peter, thank you so much for the information on everything that you've given us today. It's definitely going to be interesting to watch this transition in some of these bigger cities where the cost of living has basically been rose to the power of whatever from what it was, say 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago. And so it's going to be interesting to see how some of these things really niche down and move on. But as we move to the end of our episode, we have a couple of questions we ask every guest that comes on the show. And the first of those questions is, what is the best book that you have recently read or are currently reading?
I'm embarrassed to say that I'm probably the only person in the world who admits to not reading, but I do it with a purpose. The reason I don't now, I mean, outside of like, general leisurely stuff, the reason I don't do a lot of business related books is because I almost want to have an unadulterated view of how myself, my team, my partners come and tackle a problem. The thing that I used to hate was when I was younger, someone would say, who do you want to be? What does your company want to be? I don't want to be, I want to be me, not in this like piggish sort of way, but I want to make my way through the world. And I'm sure that Warren Buffett didn't wake up and say, I want to be Warren Buffett or Bill Gates or Jeff. They all became who they are. Like, I want to be kind of ourselves. And I think that sometimes when you get too into depth, you don't even realize that you're affected and molded by this stuff. So believe it or not, while I'm sure I could have made a lot less mistakes getting here, I don't read a ton of those things.
Awesome, man. No, everybody has their own ways, and that's doesn't mean because that's part of the problem with this world we live in today is everybody thinks their way is the best, their way is the fastest, their way is the greatest, when in fact, My grandfather used to say there's more than one way to skin a cat, and that's to however you deem it best. So no, absolutely. All right. Well, maybe this question we'll get somewhere. What is a dream vacation that you have taken or hope to take?
I went on my honeymoon. I went to the Maldives, and it was unreal, out of this world. And I would love to go back there again. It was an all out amazing experience between the food and the beaches and the water. And you probably can't feel more removed from Earth, but still be on Earth than go there. So it's definitely on my to go back list.
Oh, I'm sure, man. The Maldives, I could only imagine what that was like. I mean, I'm sure it was just as stellar as it in person as it is on everywhere you ever see it. So awesome. All right. Well, listen, Peter, where can a listener, if they like what they heard and want to maybe talk to you all about investing or learn more about Greybrook or whatever, what is the best way for a listener to reach out and get in touch with you?
Yeah, our website is probably the best way. It's greybrook.com, and there's lots of information on there both about us and ways to reach us, either just for general information or investing information, anything like that. But greybrook.com is the best place to do it.
Awesome. And just for clarification, it's GREYBROOK.
Yeah.
So that as the listeners are driving down the road or doing whatever they do, we want to make sure they remember that. But we'll also put a link to that in the show notes. And Peter, again, thank you so much for being with us today. And listeners, thank you for being with us today. We really appreciate the time you've spent with us. And while you are here, please do not forget to scroll down and smash that subscribe button. And while you're there, leave us a review and actually write a review out so that others may know what you like, love, and enjoy about the CashFlowPro podcast. And I want to thank you, Peter, again. Thank you for your time. I hope everybody has a wonderful rest of the day. CashFlowPro is hosted by Casey Brown, founder and CEO of 3000 Capital, a commercial real estate investment firm committed to providing its investors with ongoing cash flow and helping them build long-term wealth. If you enjoyed today's podcast, make sure to hit that subscribe button so you'll be notified about all our future episodes. You can find more information about us and our investment philosophy by clicking the link in the show notes below. Thanks for listening.